It is absolutely probably one of the worst movies you'll ever watch if you ever choose to torture yourself or you hate yourself or if you're ever really, really down on yourself like that. You can just throw on the Gigli and feel that much better about yourself so that you know you had nothing to do with the making of that movie, which took about 2 years, as I understand, to make in the first place, and be like, you know what? I didn't make Gigli. I had nothing to do with the making or creation of it, so I'm already feeling better. It's an instant mood booster. Take away the meds and tell my doctor to go fuck themselves. I don't need these pills to feel happy about myself no more because I had nothing to do with Gigli. But we'll get into why exactly Gigli is not so fondly remembered, period, or at all, but mostly remembered for being so bad. And in this case, bad for, you could say bad for the industry, but then again, every year it seems like we get at least a couple or like a handful of movies which are really bad. And you'll have to wonder, who approved the budget for these things? Who greenlit these projects? Who allowed these to make it off the board meeting room table of high-level execs that had nothing to do but, scratch their nuts, make you sniff each other's fingers after they do so, and be like, you know what? We got a couple of mil laying around, throw it at this asshole and let this bitch know we got a co-leading role for her too if she wants it, and just make it happen. Whatever fucking budget we got to throw at it, we'll throw at it. And I'm guessing perhaps this might have been some of what happened back in 2003 when this was released, even though this took about 2 years to make. So this was in the making since 2001 and only got released as of August, whatever date it was, in 2003. So if you do the math, yes, it is oddly enough 20 years since the release of Gigli, starring Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. 20 years since the release of this debacle, and I don't mean to say it just because I'm jumping on the bandwagon or I'm joining in on the hype and I'm in on that mob mentality of, 97% of the people on Rotten Tomatoes said it sucks, I say it sucks too, and I'm just brushing it off and never watched it. No, I sat down, I watched this thing for the first time ever start to finish, because I know I caught this on TBS, I believe, the, of course, network edited version. This was rated R, of course, and it earns its R. It does. Some time ago on TBS years ago, and I've only watched bits and pieces, and I'm really mad I missed out on one part, which really made this movie at least watchable for, let's say, 3-4 minutes with the sound off. We'll get to that part later on, though, too, which involves J-Lo, obviously, Jennifer Lopez, a 2003 chef's kiss Jennifer Lopez with all that fucking ass on her. And a pretty fucking face, too. Listen, I think J-Lo's beauty gets undermined and not lauded enough, too, only because we're so focused, as I'm Spanish and I'm a male, and red blood flows through me. It turns blue once it hits oxygen. She got all the ass you could ever ask for, you could ever want. She could be uglier, she could be shorter, she could be dumber if she is dumb at all. Although she's had such a lasting legacy, I doubt she's dumb. She's probably the farthest thing from it. She's just, so positive of herself, and she knows she's got all that action going on back there, like a trailer for the Fast and Furious, all that action behind her. She's able to stay on top of things, and I'm sure she was able to place her ass on top of plenty faces to ensure and guarantee she secured her spot in the Hollywood A-list. Is J-Lo an A-list actress, actor? Yeah, I'd say so. I think by default. I think around the world we know who J-Lo is, even though, if you remember, there was that one meme or one clip that went sort of viral. It makes the rounds every so often of when she went back to the Bronx after she was already J-Lo and a big time actress and whatever. She went to go see her old house, and the old man that lives there currently now was like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "Oh, I used to live here." And he's like, "Who are you?" It's like, "Oh, I'm Jennifer Lopez," or something like that. And he's like, "Who's that?" So that's me. It's like, okay, and makes no noise at all whatsoever about, J-Lo. He seems to be Spanish too, the guy, the old man, but old enough to probably not know or not give a shit who she is until she probably, or what she should have done was introduce herself with her back turned to him and let her ass talk for her like some Ace Ventura shit. Then probably he would have given at least more thought to okay, some fat ass bitch used to live here, good for her. Maybe if I was younger, she'd be able to sit on my face, but if she does now, then I'll need my CPAP mask later on at night just to breathe again. but who knows? There's a lot to be said, and a lot to be said that's not good about this movie. So that's the point we're making today. It's not so much a shit on it. I would say, besides J-Lo's ass and J-Lo's beautiful face, back in 2003, of course, she's still holding up now. Don't get me wrong. 20 years later, 2023, which I mean, if you're J-Lo, you're on top of the world. You know, you still got an ass that defies gravity at the age of however old she is now, like 50-something, almost, well, maybe not almost 60, but I know she's at least 53-ish, 54-ish perhaps. But she's still doing good, still doing great, and I'm sure she's like rich enough to ensure that she's got at least another, I'm going to give her like at least another 7 years. So an even 60, let's say, to still look like an absolute piece of ass with no questions, no doubts whatsoever. She could afford it. But well, with technology advancing as far as, you know, like freezing your fat and, you know, BBLs, which she'll never need one. J-Lo will never need one. She didn't need one back then, 2003. She proves it in the movie that she never needed one either, because all that ass was kept nice and tight and round with the yoga she does for like, it's at least a good 4 minutes. But we'll talk about that later too, of course. We don't want to be dogs or deviants like that either. We'll talk about J-Lo doing hot yoga and sweating her ass off for the pleasure of Ben Affleck and his terrible acting in this movie right here. Later on, we'll get to it. Just relax. But she's got nothing to prove to us as far as the looks. Her ass is still defying gravity, and she'll still be able to do so, J-Lo, I mean, of course, for at least, I'd say another 10 years. Puerto Rican genetics are really unfair to the rest of us because those women do not age. The men, who gives a shit, they look like chihuahuas by the time they're 40 and shit, if they're not covered up in tattoos. That saves them a little bit. But the women, oh, fool, forget it. They never age. They age gracefully, and it's not until like 70, 80 where you start to doubt how many times they've been grandmothers up until then, because most likely they were like grandmothers like by 40, 50-ish, whatever. J-Lo's not a grandmother, not yet. She took her time because she had something, you know, called Hollywood to focus on for a good amount of time. And we reap the benefits visually, of course, when, you know, her ass is on screen at any time. And I've sat through plenty of J-Lo movies for the fact of, where am I going to get the back shot? When's she going to turn around for a certain amount of time and I can enjoy that and I'll just go to sleep for the rest of the movie knowing I got the one back shot I needed. Click. Memory bank saved. I'm good. Keep the fucking movie on with the sound off. If you never watched and never planned to, I was about to say try to enjoy, but there really is no way to do so. If you ever plan on making time, if you hate yourself, like I said, if you're ever feeling down on yourself, you want an instant pick-me-up, you don't want to grab a bottle of pills, or you don't want to do anything else people do to get out of the depression immediately, Gigli, 2 hours, sit through it, you'll be so happy because you'll know that some asshole, a bunch of assholes, got disapproved to be made into a movie. They duped, they fooled Ben Affleck and J-Lo with enough money, with enough clout and power to get them to star and co-star in this piece of shit. And you'll be left with the biggest joy in your life knowing that you had nothing to do with this and that you're a much better person who could probably hand in a much better fucking movie than this ever could have been. 5 reshoots or so, I believe, because they said they just weren't, quote unquote, getting it right with what they had. Took about 2 years to actually make, produce, edit, and then finally release in 2003. And they still couldn't get it right with Gigli. What's the premise of Gigli, you ask? Sorry, Gigli. No, I did get it right. Gigli. Gigli is about Ben Affleck. He's a mob guy. I'm assuming somewhere out in California by the Pacific Coast area. Looks like it's Malibu. I think so. Some beach area in California. He's a mob guy. He's a very unconvincing mob guy. I'm surprised because at this point it's 2003. He's already been in a couple of movies that have been a couple of noteworthy notches on his belt to be proud of. Things I could think of offhand. Good Will Hunting, Armageddon. I know there's a couple of other ones I can't remember right now. But 2003, basically, he was already established as a pretty good actor. Not just a pretty face as he was in 2003, but, pause, but, you know, shout out to Ben Affleck in 2003 and still holding up now as far as good looks go. That's a good looking man. And especially in 2003, holy shit. If I was, you know, playing for the other team or LGBTQ, chef's kiss to young Ben Affleck. But I'm not, so we're just going to say pause with that. I'm just letting you know I'm not too shy to admit to that. But still, a very poor job done by Ben Affleck, of all actors at that time, turns in a very unconvincing mob guy accent. And it does upset me to think that the most, I would say maybe Mob Guy 101, pretend to act like this at least. It's right there in front of your face. Proof, evidence, masterclass you got available to you is The Sopranos, which is still running and playing on HBO at the time this movie was on and this movie was being made. So easily, I think easily, call a cop out, call it being lazy. Ben Affleck could have sat through a season or two of The Sopranos, copied James Gandolfini, rest in peace, copied, rest in peace, Tony Sirico, copied, you know, Pussy, I forget his real name in real life right now, Vinny Pastore, Pussy from season 1 at least, copied any one of them, emulated him, kind of like stole their vibes, if anything, too, like the kids would say, and done a way better job. He is painful to listen to. And at some point, too, when they introduced J-Lo, her name is Ricki at this point, who's a lesbian, by the way. When she comes in, it's only up until then you wonder, how bad can this movie be, if at all, if Ben Affleck's already doing a really bad job with the acting, with delivering the dialogue, with trying to pretend to be a mob guy, and then his boss, I forget the name of the actor, but I think his name was Lewis or something like that, does even worse of a job, pretend to be a mob boss of Gigli, or in this case, Ben Affleck, which his full name is Larry Gigli. And there is the thing, you know, this name is confusing enough with, I thought it was Gigli, like I'm sure 99% of the fucking people actually sat through this shit thought it was. But no, he corrects his boss early on. It's not Giggly, it's Gigli, like really. So there's no explanation beyond that. We're to assume it's Italian, which I don't think any self-worthy or respected Italian would own up to that name. They'd have to be the scrappiest guy. They'd have to be a boxer. They'd have to be like an MMA fighter with that last name, because they, Lord knows, growing up, they had to fight to defend themselves because of that last name. But whatever. We're just assuming he's Italian. He's a mob guy just by association, so it plays up the stereotypes. He corrects him with that kind of like, okay, there was supposed to be a joke there somewhere, or there's supposed to be something like, okay, that's going to be tattooed in our brain now, the proper pronunciation of the movie's name, Gigli instead of Giggly. Okay? Up until that point, Ben Affleck is kind of in control of title of worst acting so far in this movie, until it's J-Lo's turn to tag in and hand in her performance from the very get-go. She's doing the mob guy boss voice, trying to, I emphasize, trying to do a mob girl, boss, bitch, whatever kind of thing. Hey, Tony, you know, or whatever. She's basically doing that shit. It's almost like she stayed up late one night, or she threw on Hulu, or however else you would have watched SNL reruns back in 2003, saw Jim Brewer's excellent and hilarious imitation of Joe Pesci on SNL, an old SNL episode, and said, you know what, I'm going to go with that. Hey, that's basically what she sounds like throughout the whole thing. He's just like a very well-spoken mobster that's kind of like borderline, I'm trying to work white collar without coming off too blue collar, without sounding like a fucking can of ragu and whatever. It's a bad thing. The dialogue is terrible. It's too wordy. The boss has this thing with like learning a word a day and trying to use it effectively, which I guess is supposed to be funny, but it's not. It's just stupid. So the whole point of this thing is, he is, I think, presumably a hitman, this Gigli guy, or just like a low-ranking thug, where he's assigned with kidnapping the special needs, ADHD crippled, what's that thing called? What's that shit called? He's got Tourette's. Jesus fuck. What's the name of that condition they got? The Rain Man shit. not, he's got Tourette's. He curses a lot, the kid. There's something else he has that's a specific thing. I can't remember the name of the condition, but basically he's like condemned to live like with a bad brain, I think as it describes himself at one point. He's assigned to kidnap this kid. This is the younger brother of a federal prosecutor that, of course, is after the mob guys that's the boss of Gigli. He's assigned to kidnap him. He does so. It does get a bit confusing at first when they interact because it does come off like maybe this guy is Gigli's younger brother with, who's mentally challenged. But no, I gotta explain. The guy is actually the brother of, again, the federal prosecutor that's trying to fuck over and basically hold this guy hostage and be like, yeah, we got your younger brother. If you want him back, 10 mil at least, in a briefcase, I don't know, stuck somewhere under a phone booth or something like that. Apparently, the boss don't trust Gigli, Ben Affleck, enough to do so, so he assigns a female hit person, girl, whatever, to do the job as well, or to keep tabs on. I'm still not sure. Like, she's a professional. He's a low-ranking enough thug that they trust him, but they don't really fully trust him, so they assign Ricki and or J-Lo in this case to kind of keep tabs on him and or finish the job if he can't do it. And then, as every rom-com, I'm sure, uses as a tagline, drama ensues and all the craziness that unravels afterwards when she's a lesbian and he likes her even though she's a lesbian, and they're both in charge of a mentally challenged person who likes Baywatch too much and likes to call Australian overseas numbers because he likes the girl's voice and it makes him cum in his pants. That's a joke at some point too, unfortunately. It just develops by like their interaction amongst the three. He likes her, she don't like him because she likes munching on carpet. And it's a lot to explain because then Christopher Walken pops in at some point. He wants in on the action with Gigli, but I'm still not sure that at this point if he was either working with them or if he was like a federal guy trying to... I'm still so confused, honestly, because it was like out of nowhere. He was like, oh, wiry and shit, and it just kind of made no sense. So then Gigli's boss is getting frustrated with him at some point, too, because they're not able to really deliver on the goods. The prosecutor ain't backing off of them. So he says, okay, we got to chop off the guy's thumb and mail it to the prosecutor so he gets the point that, hey, we're not to be fucked with. This is what happens when you don't pay up when we tell you to. And it leads to a potentially, that could have been kind of funny scene where they sneak into a hospital. No, actually, it's led up with this because Ricki, or J-Lo, is a lesbian. She has a scorned lesbian lover who shows up at Gigli's apartment because she's staying over because, of course, she's got to keep tabs on him to make sure he's going to do his job. The ex-lover of Ricki shows up. She's a lesbian, full-blown. Another cute girl, I forget the name. She's a blonde. But she gets so upset thinking that Ricki is switching teams and or fucking Gigli that she goes into his kitchen, grabs a knife and slits her wrist. They're forced to take her to the hospital. At the ER, she's okay. But then they get the idea while they have, oh God, what's the kid's name? The mentally challenged kid in the car. They say, you know what? We're here. There's a morgue. Why not sneak into the morgue and grab a thumb, chop it off a dead body, and send that over to the prosecutor? They'll never know it's not his brother's thumb. They'll just assume it is and to be too freaked out to do, like a digital scan of like the thumbprint, right? And then that turns out to be wrong. They're called in by their boss. And then his boss's boss turns out to be Starkman, a.k.a. Al Pacino, who continues his streak from that point onwards, 2003 onwards, of why the fuck is he in this movie to begin with? Does he need the money? Does he just feel like acting? Or does he feel like being that guy that's like, oh, that movie was terrible, but at least, in this case, Al Pacino was great, or he was worth sitting through to get to his part, and then you just finish the movie anyway because it's like half an hour left after that shit. It's confusing. They give him a really weird ponytail, which is like, it's like when those guys grow out their hair and it's not long enough, but they still do the very, very end of the tail in like whatever they can tie it up in. It looks stupid. He's got like a really long mushroom bowl cut, if anything, and then at the very end, at the very back of his head, he's got a ponytail, Al Pacino, unfortunately. He does a good enough job, but he tells him basically, okay, we picked up on what you did. You gave us a fake thumb. We scanned it. We proved, of course, it's not the guy we have. We need his thumb or you two are dead. And he kills the boss, shoots him in the fucking head. At that point, that's when the movie finally proves it earns its R. There are a bunch of fucks leading up to it, but I'm sure there have been plenty of movies before that had like heavy dialogue, like as heavy with the fuck that they used before. That might have earned us PG-13 still, but then when they kill the guy, they shoot him through the brain and his brains explode all over the aquarium behind him. That does earn an R, obviously. It's really bloody and like mushy and shit too. So they're convinced they got to do something about it. They come up with a plan to basically let the kid go on his own on the beach because he's obsessed with Baywatch. He likes to see titties, so he can't be that mentally challenged. He likes to see titties and ass and girls on the beach in bikinis and shit. And they figure, you know what, let's split up because I'm a lesbian, I'm troubled, I'm a hit person as well, I can defend myself, so I'll leave you behind, I'll take your car, Gigli, thank you so much, by the way, and I'll drive off somewhere to, like, live a new life. Oh, and by the way, my real name is Rochelle, just so you know, because I was too busy hiding as a lesbian and as a hit person, and I'm sure my mom's not proud of either or, so bye-bye, I'll see you later. And then it becomes really soft and really melodramatic. You know, Gigli leaves the kid on the beach with a cute Australian girl who's going to only put up with him probably for like an hour until she figures out, oh, he's really got mental problems or whatever. He's walking around on the beach. It looks like it's summertime, but with a leather jacket on. You know, Ricki comes back to pick him up because, like, she can't live life without him. They figure that out. And it's like, this thing is all over the place. It's really underperformed. The dialogue is so bad throughout this fucking thing. Ben Affleck, again, does a really bad job as a mob guy. I'm sure he did better, if I remember correctly, in The Departed some years afterwards. J-Lo is horrible in what she tries to sound like. I don't know why she tried to, or had to try to sound Italian, or like a mobster. She could have been her J-Lo self, and that could have been more than fine, because she's already a pretty Puerto Rican from the Bronx. That's threatening enough. You don't have to put a fake-ass voice to act like you're something else entirely when you can't fucking act. We've been through this over and over again in random posts I've done before, in other reviews I've done involving J-Lo, or period. Great to look at. No complaints there whatsoever, not from me at least. But when it comes to J-Lo and acting, or worse, when she has to act like something that she's not, or outside of who she can immediately relate to, this is where the woman fails. Also, when she tries to sing, she's a failure. She cannot sing. She got lucky she had songwriters and producers that gave her hits, and supposedly she wants to make a sequel to, I forget which album she had that was like decent, but again, songwriters, producers, and people enhancing her voice. Not a great singer. I'm sure a decent performer, because who doesn't want to see her move around with that big old ass swinging in your face? You know, cheeks clapping and everything too. But when it comes to this movie, it's further proof that why is she allowed to act? Why is she being allowed to act? She's a good looking fucking girl with a fantastic ass. Selena was the best role she played because guess what? She played another Spanish woman with a gigantic ass and a lot of charm to her too. Beyond that, I really beg anybody out there to show me a J-Lo acting masterclass she's putting on in any show and or movie. She's not good, but then her being so bad and corny drags down Ben Affleck. And like I made the joke earlier in this post to promote this live review on Instagram and then later on YouTube and audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Because this is episode 69 of my shit, I would think because this is the movie that brought them together in the first place, J-Lo and Ben Affleck, back in 2001 when he started shooting this thing, I'm sure the premise, the idea, the mere thought, the wet dream he probably had of 69ing, having any sort of intimate relations with J-Lo, a 2003 Jennifer Lopez, 20 years ago, 33 years old or something like that, and that ass is still fucking top-notch, top 3 dead or alive, who wouldn't fucking take the chance, take a stab at that fucking ass? If you're Ben Affleck, if you're whoever the fuck else, whoever else she's been with before him and everything. I don't blame him whatsoever. But he's already established. He's already respected enough in the industry as an actor. After this, funny enough, he said himself as a fun fact, this movie was so bad and he knew it'd be so bad while making it and while it was in post and while they were promoting it and while they put it out finally in theaters. He knew this shit was so bad. This is what convinced him to finally take up some directing, getting behind the camera. And you know what's fucked up? It should have been J-Lo doing the same thing too. Going behind the camera or having the camera pan to the back of her ass every so often so we get the greatest thing she's given to us, the viewing audience ever, is her left and right cheek in 4K vision. I don't even need the sound on. Or if you're into farts like that and you're in the fart lover community, maybe Dolby sounds. So when she farts, it's in fucking stereo echo effect. I don't know. But let's move along to some fun facts. Okay, some things that stood out about the movie, I guess. How about that? So I already talked about Ben Affleck having a terrible performance throughout this. I'm sad to say, like a really bad job. He's talking way too fucking much. And he's putting on the accent. He's on and off with it. He's too wordy as pretending to be a mob guy. Overall dialogue is terrible. And it gets so bad where he's making so many stupid jokes because this was supposed to be a rom-com somehow. But it's a really pathetic attempt at being anything it aspires to be. A romantic comedy, a comedy period. It's a lot of cringe in this shit. A lot of jokes are like, oh, Jesus, why am I fucking watching this thing? God damn it. Or whatever. Or if you really want to get into a girl's pants and she happens to be obsessed with Gigli, one of the very few people to ever exist on this planet, maybe you can sit through it, get through it, only to find out she has terrible pussy. And then you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, just take me now. I want to die, pretty much. Like I mentioned. The dialogue is so bad, and it sounds like at some point he's trying to outdo her with how bad the dialogue is, because it's so corny, and it's so bad, surprisingly from him of all people too. It's just a shame. It's terrible. It's like they're trying to make each other laugh with how stupid they sound, the both of them trying to do that accent, the mob guy, mob person accent. It makes me scratch my head. But then also, as I was saying too, there's a point at, I want to be specific here, so if you ever want to fast forward through the movie, if you ever got a hold of it for some reason, besides you hating yourself, 53 minutes, 25 seconds in, you get the best possible view of J-Lo's ass from the side, from the back, in the front, all around. She's doing yoga for like 4 minutes straight on, and legit yoga. She's doing all the poses, the downward doggy, the bent over cow, the about to give birth cat, whatever else too. She's stretching. She's got the ass in the face. He's rambling on about fucking how he's so depressed that she's a lesbian and she won't give up his pussy to him, that it makes him not want to live anymore at some point, and trying to really talk her into taking off her pants, which she looks great in, by the way. And then that turns into like 2 or 3 minutes of her babbling about the power of the pussy and that like dicks look like snails. That's why they correlate with pussies, because they look like conch shells or something like that. It was the stupidest dialogue imaginable. And of all things, I don't need to hear about feminism coming from J-Lo of all people, of all individuals, because she knows herself, like we all do, that her best marketing tool, best promotional tool is anything tight fitting around the ass cheeks. Unless she gives us OnlyFans with actual ass shots of a bare ass or Playboy or something like that, the most we can ask for is at least before she gets too old to want to see that ass anymore and all the adobo and cellulite take effect on her Puerto Rican genetics, let's see that ass at some point. Please, I'm begging you, please, J-Lo, just do it. You don't got to sit on nobody's face. You already got Ben. He's tied down. He's a good guy, it seems like, even though he was married to Jennifer Garner. He went from Jennifer to Jennifer. And that Jennifer, by the way, Jennifer Garner, ain't no pushover. She was a piece of ass. But I don't know what happened there. Oh, apparently Ben was so into drinking and or drinking heavily. This has been reported. He confirmed himself, too, that kind of put the kibosh on the marriage. So maybe that had to do with it. I don't know. But, again, if you want to sit through that, I recommend with the sound off. If it's on YouTube, just look up Jennifer Lopez, I guess, Gigli yoga pants. And that should come up. It's worth it, but I strongly advise do it with the sound off. She says absolutely nothing worthwhile for you to waste your time and or brain cells on dialogue-wise. At an hour and 28 minutes is when we get Al Pacino, who is the only sort of saving grace of this movie, but not enough to make it a good movie or even like, promising, you know what, after a couple of views, maybe it's like, all right, no, it's still a bad movie that just happens to have Al Pacino doing his Al Pacino best, which is giving a acting 101 masterclass to both J-Lo and Ben Affleck, sitting on the couch, both looking like putzes, looking back at him, actually giving some fucking life and some flavor to the dialogue, which is already bad, but maybe he had a look over on his dialogue and said, no, I need to do this my way. Let me improvise. I can save this movie from being absolute shit. If you don't mind, of course, if you want this to be a somewhat decent, hopefully decent movie. Or at least, like I said before, one of those where that shit was so bad, but at least Al Pacino was good. That's the one thing I can't knock it for. I don't know. Let's see, whatever. Okay, so fun facts about Gigli. In case you didn't know and you probably don't want to fucking watch it, I don't blame you. It was absolutely, of course, a bomb. It failed, money-wise too, where it matters most, at the box office. It cost, I don't know how this shit cost, $75 million to make happen. I'm assuming maybe in being able to get Christopher Walken, who was wasted here, wasted opportunity, not to say he was on drugs. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they wasted Christopher Walken in his appearance in this movie, as well as Al Pacino. Maybe that's where the budget went. There's no way in fuck this makes sense as far as this movie being that much. Or Ben Affleck might have asked for that much up front, and J-Lo might have been asking for that much up front too. So maybe that's where the budget went, but it only made back $7.2 million. However, here's the funny part. Of all things and of all bombs that she's been associated with in the box office, Gigli apparently holds a soft spot in J-Lo's heart, considering, again, as I mentioned prior, this is where she and Ben Affleck met on set and started their relationship they had back 20 years ago. Fast forward now 20 years later, 2023, they're married. And I think they've been married for like a year or something like that. So good for them. That's great. They began dating as soon as the movie was done with, or through the making of, something like that, only to break up in 2004, only to reunite decades later, as I mentioned, 2022, something like that. I think that's when they got back together. Okay, but then now, as I mentioned also, Affleck, quote, however, doesn't exactly share Lopez's rose-tinted view of Gigli, though he does credit the phenomenal flop as the driving force behind his decision to become a director. As he quotes, if the reaction to Gigli hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have ultimately decided I don't really have any other avenue but to direct movies. And that's where he turned his whole life around as far as his love for movies and took his ass behind the camera to start directing and producing and all the shit he does. Which turned out to be good. He's a really good director. You know, what's that movie? Ghost Town. I think he had a hand in making The Departed and a bunch of other shit he's done since then too. So kudos to him. I'm surprised, of all things, a terrible movie starring his then piece of ass, now current wife J-Lo, was what made him say, you know what, maybe I do suck. Maybe I don't need to act no more. But he should have been saying it to her ass. Like, listen, or whenever he talks to her back in 2003 especially, like, listen, turn your back to me. Don't even fucking look at me in the face. I'm mad at you. I want to talk to your ass. Listen, ass, you need to stop fucking acting. But you're so goddamn good looking, we can't keep you off camera if we want to make some money off you. So just do your thing. I'll take the backseat in this case and stay off camera, which, again, that's what he did. That's what he decided to do. And he does go on to say, quote, it's a gift, Gigli. And I did get to meet Jennifer, the relationship with whom has really been meaningful to me in my life. So, goddamn, she took a shot at fucking Jennifer Garner. I don't know why. Maybe it wasn't just his drinking that broke them up or drove them apart, but maybe, I don't know, maybe she had something going on to it that he didn't like either too much. But I think they had allegedly, I'm assuming only, of course, because I don't have it in front of me to know, maybe they had a messy split up and something about the kids going with her. I don't know, he doesn't like that much, I don't know. And he admits to Gigli being ass, like I told you before, quote, the film was essentially a horse's head in a cow's body, which I don't know how that makes sense, what he's describing it as, but neither does the movie. And it gives us insight now. The studio at the time, because I had begun having this relationship with Jennifer, which was selling a lot of magazines because magazines were big back then. You know, the paparazzi magazines like We Spotted J-Lo and Ben Affleck on a yacht. And I think that's where the infamous picture of her in like a pink bikini on top of a yacht and him massaging her ass cheeks in the Jenny from the Block video came from. Was selling a lot of magazines and appeared to generate a lot of enthusiasm. The studio predictably latched on and insisted they wanted a romantic comedy. They wanted the two of us together and much more of that. So, because, I mean, obviously back in 2003, and still now too, both of them holding up great. Both of them still look great. A good-looking couple like that. I don't know so much about the intrigue of her being Puerto Rican, him being straight up white from Boston. Might have been something part of the appeal, but who knows at the end of the day. Maybe that had something to do with it. But two good-looking people, they're both famous. He's a really good actor. Up until that point, it's still yet to be determined what the fuck she's good at besides looking good and having a great big fat juicy ass on her that looks really great in fucking high definition big screen cameras, movie screens and shit. Can't really blame him. But that was a studio apparently threw money at their fucking direction and said, let's get a rom-com out of you guys. Let's make this happen. And who cares about the script? Who cares about whatever? We'll get money back. Thinking, of course, assuming off the paparazzi and their like frenzy, like sharks in the water chasing after chum and blood. J-Lo, Ben Affleck, snap, snap, flick, flick, video, still image, whatever. That's going to draw money into the fucking box office and or with the audience filling the seats to watch them on screen together. And it fucking failed. It bombed, as Gigli did. If I had to give this thing a final score, meaning specifically Gigli from 2003, starring Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, I would say a half or a 0.5 out of 2 would be too kind. I gotta give Gigli a 0. I can strongly recommend you don't watch this ever. Don't waste your time. I'm still mad I sat through it, but I had to feed into my curiosity of one day I'm going to sit through Gigli and see how bad this could be. I did it for the sake of the review because I'm sure there's very few out there who ever want to openly admit to ever reviewing this movie, having to sit through this thing. J-Lo looks good on screen, and that's about all I can say good about this movie. Ben Affleck looks good, really good, but then again, 20 years ago, a young Ben Affleck, you know, tall, lean, full head of hair, good-looking fucking guy as he is. If you lean that way, if you're LGBTQ, of course, you know what I mean, chef's kiss by that, but I don't lean that way, so I take it back and I throw all the chef's kisses possible, humanly possible, at her ass, at her face. There's one close-up shot of her in bed with Ben, where her hair's flowing down, like that bed hair, sex hair, where she looks incredible. I mean, I've always loved J-Lo for how she looks. Good-looking girl always has been, a good-looking woman, excuse me. But that one shot especially, it's beautiful. That, and the whole time she's blabbing about a pussy having power in tight yoga pants while hitting all the yoga poses. You know you want to see J-Lo hitting in 2003. It's beautiful. That's the only plus I can give you. Okay, and Al Pacino too, but then Al Pacino 2003 is still fairly young and still doing his thing, even though he's been in plenty of bad movies ever since 2003 and a little before that. There's that too, but that really doesn't add up. Like 3 things I mentioned right now compared to like the hundreds of fucking bad things from this movie alone, you know, it's really bad overall. 0 out of 2 for Gigli. That, however, is the end of this 20th anniversary review of Gigli, again starring Ben Affleck and J-Lo and or Jennifer Lopez, here on episode 69, wink wink. Because, of course, that's the only thing that ever would have enticed Ben Affleck enough to say, fine, we'll make this fucking movie because I'm with J-Lo, she's my girlfriend, I'm tapping that ass in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms we rented out from this mansion out in Calabasas and shit. I'm fucking her everywhere humanly possible because it's 20 years ago. My libido is up and it's stuck all up in her Puerto Rican ass. Putting some sazon, some adobo on each cheek and just eating that thing out, having to sit on me. Everything imaginable with that ass, of course. And then you got to look at her face because then again, you're like, oh man, that's a good looking face. So fuck it. I'll deal with it. I'll put up with it too. Gigli happened. It never has to happen again. J-Lo wants to do a second one apparently, or a sequel, or a second one, I don't know, or remake, whatever, because, oh my God, that's when me and Ben met 20 years ago. Even though The time we took apart, 20 years to be exact, I was with a dancer, I was with this guy, I was with this one, I went back to Mark Anthony, I did everything fucking possible to go back to other guys and, you know, really, really played the field. Meanwhile, he was only married once and had kids and seemed to be happy. But now, 20 years later, here we are again, y'all. Ha ha ha. Jenny from the block and shit. Yeah, right. Jenny back on my cock 20 years later. That's what Ben Affleck said, basically, because he put a ring on it in 2022.
Yo, it's over. All right, it's over. It's over. Move the mic. Move the mic.
Thank you.
All right.